Okay. All right. I've been spending now some hours because I'm just rendering another video. And, let's not talk about equipment too much. What do you have, what you don't have? At the moment, I have a certain set of tools that I can use. So for instance, I have a tool called a laptop, and that laptop is a device that I was able to afford. And yeah, you could say it was funded by my parents. Because of my consistent decision to keep doing what I want to do, right? So, partly selfish, partly also self-sacrificing, partly egoistic, all kinds of things. Because what I seem to want to do is exactly this for the rest of my life, because it's the only thing that ever seemed to me like I could literally do it for the rest of my life. I'm sometimes thinking about taking on other jobs like a bouldering instructor or something. But, I'm past this. I'm just jumping in there, and if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna quit. That's how I used to do it. Also in relationships and all kinds of things. I would just go there and do it. And then I would realize, it doesn't work out, and I would pull away. Right now I'm at the stage where I want more stability, and that means before I do anything at all, I think about it. Not too long, just long enough to make a decision. And that means I will have to make a choice. Because something is demanded from me. I have to make a decision. Do I want to keep producing content, which drives me mad? Or do I want to work for other people, which seems like I'm wasting all my potential so that other people can make a living? Because, right, if I work for other people, what do I do? I spend time and effort, energy. I spend my life helping somebody else to get richer. And this person will use that money probably for selfish reasons. Right? If business is going well, which I help them to get, right, good business, because that's what I can do. I'm like a energetic person. I can give a lot. And if I give a lot to the business of another person, I help them to make their dream a reality. So there's another way of living, and that is you have to create your own space where you can do what you want, earn money, and then use that money to give to people. That's a very weird concept for most people. Right, you first have to get the money machine going. You have to produce whatever you want to produce. I don't know, crochet hats, make stuff with wood, create content online. You can basically do anything online. Now it's quite interesting because I didn't really want to talk about this, but now I've decided to do it anyway. Because for some reason I had the feeling, there's something I wanted to do. And then I was looking at stuff. Okay, do I want this? Do I actually want to work for somebody else? Because I'm afraid that I'm not going to earn money with this. And then I think, are you fucking nuts? What you're creating is marvelous. So instead of listening to your fear that you cannot manage with all the expectations and all the workload, okay, I have created my own space that is online, where people can see it. You know, I can create whatever I want and I can put it out there with the methods and the tools that I like. Okay, that's my space. I like my space. I'm standing in my space right now and I'm recording something. Here I feel good. I literally feel good. For the past couple of weeks, I haven't smoked any cannabis. You know, there was a phase I did rapé, and I think I'm gonna do that again. I'm not quite sure yet. Now you have to understand how I used to live my life. I was just jumping from one thing to the next. You know, it's like, oh, women would come, women would go. Women would come, women would go. You know, then some kind of exercises would come, some kind of exercises would go. There was no consistency in my life because I also had nothing to be consistent with. But now I found something that actually helps me, that propels me through the day, and where I can basically channel all my ideas, all my craziness, all my emotions. I can channel it all into that thing. And that means I feel more by myself. Because if I go and work for other people, what happens? You know, they want stuff from me, so they start pulling me in a certain direction. I don't want that. Right? Now I'm living with family. That means they want to pull me in a certain direction. Do you want to join for dinner? You know, can you do this? Can you do that? I need help, blah, 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 blah. All kinds of expectations are pulling you apart. You know, they want you to be around so that they can feel better about themselves because maybe, you know, you're quite a lively character and you bring a lot of stability. These kind of things, they literally pull you apart. And I was quite fond of smoking cannabis or just using cannabis in whatever way, eating it or whatever. I've realized now why I stopped using it. It did help me for a while because it kind of allows you to relax. But if you become too relaxed, you stop being active. So it makes you soft, it makes you weak, it connects you to your kind of like feminine side. But if you as a man smoke a lot of cannabis and you're only like, you know, like feminine, then where's your stability? Where's your I'm gonna go out and hike or something? You know, where's my I'm gonna do push-ups or, you know, I'm aspiring to do yoga? You know, where's all of that? You know, there's two types of yogis. Not just. But I want to reduce it to that. There's the one that put in the work, and there's the ones that just smoke cannabis. You know, I got that from a documentary about yoga. You know, if I'm interested in something, I look stuff up instead of having all these opinions about yoga that it's shit and, you know, it's about wearing tight pants and buying mattresses. I don't have a yoga mattress. I don't have tight pants. I wear what I have, you know, and I do it on whatever surface I have. That can be outside, you know, that can be on a carpet. Right? So, you know, this kind of mentality also keeps me flexible because I have to adapt to my surroundings. And that means if I'm doing it on a carpet, it's a different challenge than if I'm doing it outside when it's cold, or if I'm doing it on a surface that is like more slippery, right? So it introduces change into your life. I like that. Plus, I don't buy stuff that I have to carry around. And then, you know, if I would go on holiday, I want to do yoga, I don't have a mattress. Oh, I cannot do yoga now. Which is, of course, absolute bullshit. Because yoga is a way of life. It's not a mattress, and it's not tight pants, because tight pants restrict energy flow. They make no sense. It's a symbol of ignorance if you are wearing them. And the worst thing is, it's not even just women wearing them, it's also men wearing them. I mean, seriously, who can take this serious? Anyway, so I've created my own space where I can do what I want, where I can be, how I feel like I am. But sometimes I've also realized I have to leave this space of, what I've created. And there are three very distinct experiences with cannabis that I would like to comment on. The first is in, just before an ayahuasca ceremony, I'm standing in the kitchen. I smoked a large amount of cannabis, and I'm standing in the kitchen. And there's 4 other people. And on the inside is building up the desire to scream. I really want to scream. And then somebody comes along. The person who lives there, who's holding the ceremony. And I say, listen, I really feel like I need to scream. Can I do that? And then he says, well, if you really have to, you can, but maybe try going without. Okay. He leaves again because he also knows, I'm kind of all right on my own. I'm quite a tough person or a tough being. I can work well on my own. I actually work better on my own. If I'm in charge, right? Because I want to trust myself. That's a challenge to me, which is why I like doing psychedelics on my own. Anyway, as I was standing there, and I felt like screaming. And then I thought, why do I want to scream? And suddenly I was going through all these kinds of things that made me go insane in that moment. And I realized that it was an overload of expectations. While I was standing there, in my mind, I was going through every possible expectation that any person in the room could have of me. Whether they had them or not, they probably did not. But they might have, because they are as insecure as I am. I mean, you get that. They are as insecure as I am. Maybe I am a bit more secure with myself because I'm quite self-conscious. And that gives me security. So if I feel like I want to scream, I realize I want to scream. I can even phrase the desire to scream. And then I can do something with that. I can look at it. Why do I want to scream? And then I can dissolve it with my mind by feeling into the desire to want to scream. I can feel myself into that. There's other desires where I find it a little less easy, which is like the desire to watch porn. Of course, I know why I do that. I want to have sex really badly. I want to be with a woman, with one very specific woman who's out of reach. So, I really want to have sex. Yeah, so I watch porn, which of course is a dead end. Anyway, of course, I know, now I'm saying it, I know I could do the same thing with watching porn. It would drive me insane. And if I would look at it long enough, what drives me insane, it would dissolve. Well, that's a kind of a challenge for me now, right? Too bad. Anyway, so that was the first experience. And once I got to the insight, holy shit, what I'm feeling, what drives me mad right now, is all of these unspoken expectations in the room. And it might actually be that I am feeling what other people want me to give them because they're insecure, right? And it's all their unresolved desires, which they never looked at. And they're just floating about in the room. And because we're all kind of, connected, you have hair, it's an antennae. So, it's like you're picking up their vibrations. It's possible. So in order to stay sane in such a moment, you have to learn to hold your own space wherever you go. Now, the second experience I had, and that's also with cannabis, but this time I was alone in my room. And I was smoking really strong Moroccan hash with sage. Because I don't use tobacco. And, hash, you need something that's like easily inflammable. So I was smoking Moroccan hash with sage. And I was smoking, I had the resolve, I'm going to smoke until I can no longer smoke. So, I really wanted to blast myself out of space. The door was closed but unlocked, which means somebody could have come in. That is relevant for later. So as I was sitting there cross-legged, right in front of my little altar, and I was smoking, and while I could still smoke, I kept smoking. And yeah, it scared the shit out of me, and I kept smoking, and I kept smoking. I would inhale, breathe deeply with the smoke into my lungs, and then press out my chest. And that's already quite an intense process, because it means you're like stretching out your heart. Anyway, I was doing that, and for a while it actually felt quite good. And I got to this place where I couldn't smoke anymore. I just realized it's too much, and I felt kind of relaxed. But then suddenly, it's quite a weird sensation. Everything around me started to vibrate, like shaking. And the way I would describe it later was, it felt like that whoever I thought I was, right? It felt like I was being split into 1 million pieces, like grains of sand. Suddenly I wasn't this, I'm Christopher, but I was like 1 million pieces of sand. And these 1 million pieces of sand, right, that was me now, were on a rattle board, and somebody was shaking the rattle board. And so me, who I thought I was split into 1 million pieces of sand, right? 1 million pieces of split apart consciousness that were suddenly being moved in all different directions, all at the same time, but all somewhere else. And that's when I had the sensation of, I didn't know if I was, I felt like I was dissolving. I felt like I was falling and coming back, and falling and coming back. I was like exploding and being pulled together, exploding and being pulled together, like, but really fast. Exploding into 1 million pieces, and then being sucked back into whoever you think you were. And then realizing, fuck, it feels like I'm dying right now. That's literally how it felt. And what really freaked me at that time was that I hadn't locked the door. And I realized if somebody would come in now, I wouldn't know what to do. Because there's this sense of panic. It's like I completely lost control in that moment, which was, in a sense, of course, what I wanted. But it's a very scary place to be in. And I think that's what causes a lot of anxiety and paranoia in people. It's that complete instability, this feeling of dissolution. The only thing you can do in this moment is to focus. So what I realized was, as long as I kept moving, so I started, I was sitting cross-legged on the ground, and I was literally being weighed down by this feeling of dissolution. But the thing is also, how do you deal with that? I felt like I had to do something. Maybe breathing would have helped, I'm not quite sure. But what I did, I started rotating my arms. My left and my right arm, I would rotate them, and that allowed me to focus on something, right? That allowed me to focus and to reconnect and to keep my body and my consciousness together, because that's what focus does, right? And so I would rotate my arms, which is of course good for circulation. And while I would do so, I would focus on my hands. Every time they would pass in front of me, it's like a focus point. Okay, so it's like alternating. I'm not rotating them together at the same time, but like one comes, then the other comes. One comes, then the other comes. It's like what you do when you're swimming, not this normal swimming, but this really fancy fast swimming. When you're, I don't know how it's called, crawling maybe, right? So I would do something like this, which is also a great exercise if you're sitting a lot, right? If you're sitting a lot or standing a lot, right? If you have to wait for something, you can just do that. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Anyway, to a certain degree that helped, but at some point I was just I was bending over and I was just holding myself on the last thing I could find, and that was trust. And I just said, please God help me. I don't really believe in God in that sense that the church talks about it. But I believe that it's something, I don't know, it's a feeling. I don't know what I'm supposed to believe, because in a sense, God is just a word. But to me, it's something I can hold on to. At least, I have the feeling something exists, because there is higher wisdom. Because when I'm sometimes in these states, or I'm talking about something, or I'm creating something, that's not just me who's doing that. There's other things involved. And that includes all the people that I met during my life, That includes people, that are not even here right now. Sometimes I'm channeling emotions from people that I meet online into my content. That's how it's done. Because if I see an image of a person, I look at somebody's post on Instagram, I can literally tell what they're feeling. I see right through all of this, because everything is energy. And if you post something online, it leaves a trace, an energetic trace. And that's why I've created my own space where I can feel safe, and that reminds me of this is who I am. And this is why being creative helps me, because it shows me who I am and how I feel. Anyway, this was the second. At one point, I managed to crawl into my bed, just pull a blanket over me and just sleep. The other thing is, of course, that was the first night. It really shattered me. 2 nights later, I did the same thing. And that time it was easier. And the day after that, I did it again. And this time I managed, in the same state, to walk outside of the room while there were still people busy and go to the toilet and even have a conversation. So I managed to deal with this feeling. Now, yesterday, I haven't smoked in quite a while. And I haven't taken anything else. I've been mostly living just regular. Drinking black tea, okay, going a lot outside, hiking, creating a lot of content, watching porn, but without ejaculating. I'm always trying to keep that energy inside, at least, That's at least something. So I can train to hold the energy rather than to spill it into a tissue. So I was going, I had a rest day. I thought I'm going to rest today. So I was starting a movie, an anime, which started quite nice. It's called Belle. But it turned out to be really shit. It was a really terrible movie. Rather, if you want to watch an anime and get something out of it, I could recommend Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, or Children of the Sea is a very good anime type of movie. Teikoking Creed is quite nice as well. Has its own unique style. Weathering with You, Patema Inverted. That's just a number. Everybody who likes it a bit darker, but still really good storyline. Dorohedoro, I quite like that. But yeah, as time moved on, I also felt like I was less getting into this violent genre. I wanted to see different things. So if I watch a movie and the story is really shit, I say bad storytelling. Because, they focus more on how things look or blah blah, but they're kind of like, it doesn't matter. This super hyped, weird kind of Japanese, I'm living in a country that has zero freedom. So I'm just expressing everything that comes from my fantasy without ever really living it. And that's, of course, what makes my creative content quite unique, is because I do go out into nature quite a lot. So I challenge myself, which makes my creative content quite powerful and intimidating to some people. That's just a fact. Because that's literally who I am. I'm quite intimidating. I don't give in easily. And that's also, yesterday, I was sitting here, I thought I'm having my chill day. Felt quite good. I was in my own space, I felt quite good. Although I sometimes feel like, I actually don't deserve relaxing. No, actually I do. But I have to allow myself to relax, of course. Anyway, and then once I've done enough, it's much easier to relax, by the way. If you've gone for a 3-hour hike in the rain, it's much easier to relax afterwards than if you've just sat at home all day. So comfort, in order to appreciate comfort, you need discomfort. And yesterday was really uncomfortable because, I was just sitting here thinking of nothing. I just wanted to watch that movie. At that point, I didn't know how shit it was. And then suddenly, somebody rang the bell. The bell. That's actually quite interesting because the movie I was watching was called Belle. And I heard, somebody called to me and said, "Are you there?" Just to know whether I have time. And I opened the door and there was somebody standing, a young adult, not really an adult, but a young, let's call him a teenager. He's like 17 or something. And, I went to him and he said, "I'm just going to tell the story. Do you want to, I want to make hash brownies," he said. "And I wanted to ask you if you can help me with that, with making, the hash butter." And the thing is, he'd probably do it anyway. And I thought, I'm just going to go there because if life calls on you like this, all you can do is say yes. And so I just put on my stuff and I walked with him, and he had also a friend. And then we went to the place where he lives. It's not his own apartment. He lives with, a parent. And so we went inside. Nobody was there. That's how it was. And then their plan was to make butter with wheat. And then to make that into brownies. So to use the wheat butter, make it into brownies, and then to eat that. Now the thing is that eating brownies, depending on how strong it is, of course, so if you make oil and you've never done that and you don't know really how strong you're gonna react to it, when you eat it, it takes a lot of time. So it might be this might be quite good, or you might end up vomiting or having a panic attack or something. Okay, so I was there, and while I was there, the other person who was present said, he also wanted to smoke. And as a thank you, they also wanted to give me like 2 grams of weed or something. And I had it already actually in my pocket. Anyway, so I said, okay, then, we use 8 grams to make wheat butter with 375 grams of wheat, 375 grams of butter, and roughly like 7 to 8 grams of wheat. Right? So we made it all small, and then we just put it in a pot on a stove and just put it on like low temperature until it would be hot, because you don't want to boil it. And then would turn it off again so that it could soak, right? Like an infusion, right? The best way, of course, is to do it in a water bath, a bain-marie, a water bath. And I don't use butter, I use coconut oil. I like that better. I think it also holds longer. I think butter at one point might just get rancid. Of course, if you make ghee out of it, you could use ghee if you want the buttery flavor. I like coconut fat. And I would put coconut fat, and I also think hash is nicer. And I would put that in it. However much. I once took 500 grams of coconut fat and 5 grams of Moroccan hash. And I just put it all into a water bath. Look up how you do a water bath. I don't have to tell you that. And then I would let that, keep it heated, because that just heats the mixture of oil and cannabis. You want to have it at about 80 degrees or something. And the thing is, if you just put fat with cannabis in a pot, the result is that, fat heats up to, 400 degrees. That's why you can fry things with them. Water starts to condense at 100 degrees Celsius. And that means if you take a pot and you put water inside, and then you take like a bowl or a high glass with cannabis and coconut fat, and you put that into the pot with the water, that's what a water bath is. And then you bring the water to a simmer. You know that because the excess heat is going to evaporate. If you know what I mean, right? And that means the oil can never go higher than 100 degrees Celsius. And so I would usually, I wouldn't really have it simmer. I would have just before boiling or something. And then for a couple of hours, right? You can always put the heat back up, put it back down, right? Put it back up until it's almost boiling, and then you put it back down and just let it simmer. Let it stand in the heat of the water. Then you also don't have to watch it as much. Because, of course, if you keep the water boiling, you always have to add new water, because it's going to evaporate, and then, You just have an empty pot with glass standing inside. That's not really nice. Anyway, so that's just a general process. So we didn't have a water bath. We just put butter into a pot, put weed inside, and then we would heat it up. And once it was like quite hot, we would turn off the heat, but let it stand with a lid on the stove, like on the hot plate, until it was cooling down a little, and then we would turn it up again a bit until it was like heated. And that's how we would keep doing it for about 2 hours. If you do it for 4 hours, it's probably better. There's like probably some kind of processes that are happening. I generally liked it to have it soak longer, to activate it or something. Anyway, and while this was happening, I was also being there as the oldest in the room with the most experience. And then the one guy said, hey, I actually want to smoke. And I thought, okay, I'm going to join in on that. So I rolled a joint with sage. And then we would sit down, and I did my thing, and then we smoked. And then it became apparent, because I thought, they asked me to help them make these brownies. And then we kind of would eat them together and maybe go for a hike. Well, it turned out that wasn't what they wanted. So, these two friends, one of them thought they were doing it together, while the other one wanted to take the brownies and be with his girlfriend. And at that moment I thought, so what the fuck am I doing here? So I smoked that joint, and they were relying on me, for instructions. But the problem was, at one point, I felt really good in the beginning, and then I smoked, and suddenly this same sensation that I had described to you earlier, that I felt like I was basically exploding and imploding and all kinds of things, happened again, which meant I couldn't help them anymore, because I was on the verge of dying. That's how I felt like. And so all I could do was, they would worry about, okay, what are we going to do now? Butter, and, what should we do? How much flour to take and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I was trying to just keep myself together, which meant I started to move my hand around, and, I focused on my hand and I turned in circles just really slowly, and that gave me stability, because focusing on your hand gives you something where you can hold your focus on. And then it's a form of meditation where you just stare at your hand. You can do that probably while walking, and then I would turn at the same time, and that gave me stability. It's like introducing motion and movement. And sitting still is usually the worst thing you can do in such a situation. And these two, kids basically, were just worrying about their shit, and I was basically losing it. I was just busy holding myself together. I don't know what happens if I would have done nothing. What would have happened? I would have probably vomited, or I would have fainted. I didn't want to do that, because I also have a responsibility in that situation. Right? If you're with other people, you have to learn to keep it together. So that was the most I could do, from not freaking out, because on the inside I was literally freaking out. And I don't know if that was me or if that was them. No, I don't know that. I don't know if it was me or it was them. But I know that they have struggles with anxiety and stuff, only they don't know how to deal with it, so they run to doctors. Right? If they smoke cannabis, they start feeling anxious, they feel like they have a pressure in the chest. You know what they do? They think, I don't know, oh shit, I'm getting sick, I'm gonna have a heart attack. So they run to a doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you have a heart muscle inflammation. And if they would ask me, I would probably say, well, the pressure on the chest is just, the process of opening the heart. So you have to stretch out your chest, you have to get moving, you have to start breathing and stretch out your chest. That's my perspective on what's happening. Completely different experience also. going to the doctor and then, I don't know, taking some kind of thing that they give you, or even having surgery. Or to say, I take responsibility of this and I look at what I'm feeling, what causes the tightness, and then I'm doing something about that, which is stretching out the chest. And that's a quite heavy process. And I think sometimes it's better to just not smoke cannabis. And what showed it to me in that moment, I felt so terrible. And I don't know if it was because I was with them, or if that is how I feel, but the thing is, when I'm alone at home, I actually feel quite all right. And when I go out hiking, I also feel quite all right. But in that moment, I just felt like I want to fucking die. That's how I felt like, and I think that's how they feel, because they pulled me into their space. And then I smoked cannabis with them. That's how I felt. All I could do was to just keep paddling. That's what I mean when you want to surf. Right? If you want to surf, you have to know how to paddle. And, sometimes you literally have to paddle. So to just smoke cannabis and think that's going to do it for you, it's not the solution. So believe it or not, but because I knew we weren't taking this together, so my only part was to get them going. So I settled on that. Because I said, I'm not your father, I'm not your friend. I may be friendly to you, but you also piss me off because, young boys, some of these young boys, they don't respect you. If you're too friendly with them, they just start abusing you and treating you like shit. I've been there many times. And, what was my solution? Because I realized, while I was at home, in my own space, I felt quite good. They pulled me out of it. It's okay. They asked for help. I went there. And then I came to the solution. I just have to leave now because this isn't getting any better. So while I was just standing there paddling, and at one point I actually took one of my videos, one of the music videos called, The Onion, from the album Experimental. I think that's it. And I was listening to that, and that gave me something that I could hold on to, literally, because, it's designed to do that, to keep you in the moment. That's what it's designed to do. And so I was using that, which was, of course, a great exercise to also see what my content does or can do, if you know how to work with it. And then I said at one point, because they just kept asking me, but at one point they realized, I'm not going to help them. And I also said to them, all I'm doing here is emotional stability for you. I'm not here to do all the work for you. All I'm giving you is emotional stability. And so at one point, when the dough was all right and they were still discussing all kinds of things, I said, I'm going to leave now. And then they tried to make me feel bad about it. I said, well, that's how it is. 2 hours ago, I was comfortably sitting in my room, and now I just feel shit. That's just how it is. And so I pulled out of there. Because it wasn't intended to be a group session from the beginning. So I'm not going to hang around. If they would have wanted to take it with me, to let me guide them through it, that's a different story. But if they just want to go and eat it with their friends and want me have them make it for them, right? But then I also have to take responsibility. So I said, I'm going to leave now. Whatever you do now is your problem. And so that's what happened. Of course, it's a different story if I would lead ceremonies for people. They would come to me, they would want me to give them security. But in a sense, I'm not quite sure if that's what I want to do. Because I think that if it comes to psychedelics, people have to make their own experiences. So they cannot rely on other people too much all the time. You have to learn how to work with these things if you want to use them. And that's what I showed them. You can say, well, that's irresponsible. Well, they bought the stuff. They didn't ask me beforehand. They just showed up and said, hey, can you help us? And I could have said, no, I'm not. But, it's not like I did nothing. I helped them, but, you have to eat it yourself. Because that's what you wanted, It turned out, it was a selfish idea that they had. At the same time, the way they would make the brownies, that's not how I would eat it. I'd probably use the oil for a cacao ceremony. I'd probably use the oil with porridge, but not with some instant bake mixture. Right? So, different mindset. But yeah, maybe they got some inspiration. Maybe they saw that if you feel shit, you just do other things. Because a lot of people, they smoke or they eat it and they just sit around. No, that's when you have to get moving. Because it opens you up. So do something with that energy. Anyway, so that was pretty scary. And after that, I think I first put on my shoes. Did I actually put on my shoes? I actually don't remember. All I remember is that I was walking. I was walking in the dark, in the park. There was a full moon. And I was going for a walk and it felt incredibly beautiful. And it did. You see, I don't even know anymore if I took off my shoes. I just know I was walking and it felt so good to walk. Like that really gave me stability. It felt so incredibly good to walk. And the moon was shining. That's what I remember, but it's all kind of blurry. And then I went back home. And just kept watching that movie. But then I felt good again. I was back in my own space. But I've created that space. It's not the tidiest thing. But at least I have a space. And I'm quite protective of that. I don't easily... I don't want that anybody comes in here. This is my space. I often lock the door. I think... I don't know, a man or something, I think everybody should have their own room. I think a woman should have her own room. I think a man should have his own room. And I think that it's quite important that you can choose sometimes to vanish. And that's what I see, for instance, like, the way I grew up, nobody ever had really their own space. At least to me, who's a spiritual seeker, it's quite important to have my own space where I can sometimes retreat to and just do my own thing. Anyway, so that's just what I wanted to talk to you about. Having your own space, but also making experiences once in a while how it feels like to bring your own space to other people. Because that's what I did. I just did what I would have done when I was at home. I didn't really think about it, I just did it. Maybe it scared them, but in the end they say, what the fuck, what a crazy guy. But, what can I say? That's just how it is. So yeah, cheers. Be responsible is all there is. If you ingest something and you start, screaming your guts out and the police comes, it's your fucking fault. You were ignorant of what would happen. You were taking psychedelics lightly. Psychedelics are your own mirror. So if you scream, it's just fear of yourself, so learn to live with that.